In a world where appearances often shape perception, sometimes the quiet power of legacy speaks louder than status. This is the story of a young black college student who walked into a five-star restaurant expecting nothing more than a good meal and walked out having reminded an entire room of what dignity, strength, and legacy truly look like. They judged him before they knew who he was. They had no idea who his father was. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon at Maison Étoilée, a five-star restaurant known for its exclusivity and elegance. The clink of fine cutlery, soft jazz floating through the air, and the polished smile of waitstaff kept everything in perfect rhythm. Until he walked in. A young black man, no older than 20, stepped through the front doors wearing jeans and a St. Peter's University t-shirt. He looked around, eyes curious, shoulders relaxed. He didn't have a reservation. He didn't look like the usual clientele. To the manager, that was enough. Within minutes, the boy was approached. "Sir, you may be in the wrong place," the manager said, not with concern, but with warning. "I'm just here for lunch," the young man replied. The manager pressed. "No ID, no reservation, and certainly no suit. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." His hand pushed gently, then firmly, against the boy's chest. The boy stepped back, eyes wide. "Hey, don't touch me!" Voices rose. Diners turned their heads. Tension crackled. The manager raised his voice just enough for the room to hear. "We don't tolerate disruptions." Then from the back, footsteps echoed. A presence filled the room. Dressed in full navy dress blues, complete with gold buttons and ribbons across his chest, a black man in his 50s walked calmly forward. Eyes sharp, bearing proud, he stopped right between them. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice like polished steel. The manager blinked, unsure. "Sir, this young man is my son," the officer interrupted. "And I'm the owner of this restaurant." Silence. The air shifted. The diners looked again, this time with embarrassment, with realization. The manager's face drained of color. "I served 30 years as a Marine," the officer continued. Voice, low but firm. "I built this place from the ground up, and today I brought my son here to celebrate him making Dean's List," the manager stammered. Apologies tumbled out, but the officer only looked at his son. "You okay?" The boy nodded. The two walked past the stunned staff and sat at the best table in the house, reserved weeks ago under a different name. Because respect isn't worn, it's earned and remembered. In a world where appearances often shape perception, sometimes the quiet power of legacy speaks louder than status. This is the story of a young black college student who walked into a five-star restaurant expecting nothing more than a good meal, and walked out having reminded an entire room of what dignity, strength, and legacy truly look like. They judged him before they knew who he was. They had no idea who his father was. It was 1:10 p.m. on a Thursday when Jordan stepped into Maison Étoilée. He had finished his last final exam that morning and was still buzzing with relief. His dad had told him to meet him here for lunch. "A surprise," he said. Jordan had never eaten somewhere like this. It smelled like polished oak, truffle butter, and old money. He stood at the entrance, scanning for his dad. The manager was there before the hostess. Tall, suited, and pale as the linens on the tables, he looked Jordan up and down. Wrinkled shirt, university tee, no reservation. Not their usual type. "Excuse me," the manager said, voice clipped. "Can I help you?" "I'm meeting someone, my father." He said meet him here. "Do you have a reservation?" "No." He said he already... "I'm going to have to ask you to wait outside. This is a private venue and we're at capacity." A few nearby diners turned their heads. Jordan's cheeks burned. He took a step back, caught off guard by how fast it escalated. "I'm just waiting. You don't have to push me." But the manager was already nudging him toward the door, speaking louder now, for others to hear. "Sir, if you don't leave, I'll have to call security. That's when the doors parted again. Commander Elijah Brooks, retired Marine officer, 30 years of service and co-founder of Maison Étoilée, stepped through in full uniform. His presence swallowed the room. He saw the manager's hand on his son's chest. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, voice calm but commanding. The manager froze. "Sir, I didn't realize this young man is my son," the commander said, moving to stand beside Jordan. A pause. Sharp. Uncomfortable. Powerful. The room went silent. Every head turned. Every judgment, every assumption, every whispered bias hung in the air. "I brought him here for a private lunch," the commander said evenly. "At the restaurant I own." The manager began apologizing, stammering apologies soaked in sudden respect, but the commander didn't look at him. He looked only at his son. "You good, son?" Jordan nodded, still a bit stunned. "Come on," Commander Brooks said, guiding him past the stunned staff. "Let's eat." They were seated at the corner window table, sunlit, private, already, set for two. The manager tried to recover, offering wine, service, a comp dessert. But the damage had been done, because this wasn't just about a table. It wasn't about dress codes or decorum. It was about assumptions. The kind of assumptions Jordan had grown up seeing, the kind his father had fought his whole life to overcome, and, as the two of them sat, breaking bread and sharing quiet laughs, the room learned something that day. Respect isn't worn on your sleeve. It's lived and remembered, even, especially, when it's unexpected. The waiter brought their menus, hands slightly trembling. Jordan noticed. His father didn't, or maybe he did, and chose grace. "Order anything you want," Commander Brooks said, removing his cover and resting it gently beside his seat. "Today's about you." Jordan looked around, still tense. "You didn't have to step in like that, Dad." Elijah raised an eyebrow. "You think I'd let someone put hands on my son in my house?" Jordan chuckled, the tension in his shoulders finally easing. "No, sir." The moment passed, and with it, a weight Jordan hadn't even realized he was carrying. He hadn't just felt embarrassed. He'd felt small, invisible, something his dad had taught him never to accept, but still it snuck up sometimes. "I thought I was past it," Jordan admitted. "The looks, the way people just assume." His father leaned forward. "You never get past it, son. You learn how to stand taller in it, how to use it." Jordan nodded, quiet. "You ever go through that in uniform?" Elijah's face shifted, just slightly. "Plenty. First black officer at my station. They called me sir to my face and questioned my orders behind my back. Some folks didn't salute. Others saluted. But with hate behind their eyes, I didn't flinch." He let that hang in the air for a beat. "Because I knew who I was, and I made damn sure they never forgot it. That silenced Jordan more than anything else could have. Not from fear, but from pride. I guess I've still got a lot to learn," he said. His father smiled. "You've already learned the most important part. You showed up. You didn't back down. And you didn't let anger write the story for you." The waiter returned with plates, artfully arranged dishes that neither of them truly tasted in that moment. Not because the food wasn't good, but because the conversation was better. As the sun dropped lower in the sky and the restaurant's glow turned golden, father and son sat together, not just as guests in a space, but as owners of their own story. The restaurant had no idea who Jordan was when he walked in. They knew now. Their entrees arrived, perfectly plated, garnished like something out of a magazine. Jordan poked at his seared duck breast, but his mind wasn't on the food. "I didn't expect today to go like this," he said quietly. His father's fork paused mid-air. "You mean you didn't expect to be reminded that being smart, respectful, and black still makes you a threat in some people's eyes?" Jordan didn't answer at first. That truth didn't need repeating, but it landed heavier coming from a man who had lived it through decades, through wars, through boardrooms and barracks. "I thought being in college..." having a dad like you would make it different. Elijah set his utensils down, folded his hands, and looked his son in the eyes. Son, I spent 30 years in the Marines. I earned my command. I bled for this country. You think any of that stopped them from questioning if I really belonged in the officers' mess? He leaned back. No matter how many stripes are on your arm or how many stars are on your rating, some people will always see you as a visitor in their world. But here's the truth. It was never their world to begin with. We just built it and gave them the illusion of ownership. Jordan took that in. You really own this place? He asked after a long pause. Half of it, Elijah said. Bought. 10 years ago with a business partner I served with. I let him be the face of it. That was the plan. Quiet ownership. No spotlight. Why? Jordan asked. Why stay quiet? Elijah looked around the dining room, polished, refined, expensive. Then he glanced back at his son. Because power doesn't always need to announce itself. Sometimes the best thing you can do is watch how people act when they think you're not watching. Jordan nodded. He was beginning to understand. There was strength in silence, but also strategy. I guess the manager failed the test today. His father gave a small smile. No, son, we passed it. A few tables away, whispers began again. Diners who had seen the confrontation but said nothing now looked on with thin smiles, maybe even regret. The manager had disappeared into the back, likely realizing there was no salvaging this moment. Jordan looked at his dad. So what happens now? Elijah's gaze remained calm, calculating. He'll be spoken to. Whether he stays or goes, I haven't decided yet. But he'll remember this day. Everyone here will. Jordan sipped his water and looked out the window. You ever get tired of it? The fight? His father's eyes softened. Every damn day. Jordan didn't expect that answer. But then I think about your grandfather, Elijah continued. He wasn't allowed to sit at counters like this. He couldn't eat in places like this at all. But he raised me to believe I still could. And now look, we own it. He reached across the table, placed his hand over Jordan's. And one day, son, you'll do more than me. That's how we win. Not in one battle, but generation by generation. Jordan swallowed hard. It wasn't the food, it was the gravity of it all. The unspoken history that sat with them at the table. 3 generations worth of struggle, dignity, and quiet triumph wrapped into a single meal. They finished lunch slowly, talking more about school, about girls, about life. Nothing fancy. Just father and son catching up, like they were any other family. Except they weren't. When they finally stood to leave, the restaurant seemed quieter. A different kind of silence, respectful, awkward, curious. As they passed the front, a hostess whispered to the busser, "That's the owner." Jordan heard it, so did his father. Neither reacted. Outside, the sun was warm. The city buzzed, uncaring, of what had just taken place inside that gilded room. Jordan turned to his father before they went their separate ways. You coming to graduation? Elijah gave him that sharp, proud smile. Wouldn't miss it. They shook hands first, then hugged, and as Jordan walked away, the weight on his shoulders felt different. Not heavier, not lighter, but defined. He knew who he was. Now the world did too. A few weeks passed. Finals ended, graduation neared. Jordan had returned to campus, his routine falling back into place. But something had shifted inside him. He was walking a little straighter, listening closer, thinking deeper. It wasn't just the incident at the restaurant. It was what it represented. That quiet moment between generations. The understanding that he wasn't just a student, or a son, or even just a young black man trying to make it. He was a legacy in motion. One evening, after a long day of studying, Jordan sat on the steps outside his dorm, phone in hand. He'd been staring at a blank note for 20 minutes, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. Finally, he started typing. Dear. Dad? No, too formal. He erased it and started again. Pop, I've been thinking about what happened at the restaurant. I've been thinking about everything you said. And I just wanted to say thank you. He kept going. Thank you for not just standing up for me, but showing me how to stand for myself. I saw the way you handled that manager. You didn't yell. You didn't throw it in his face. You reminded him, quietly, of who you are. And that made more noise than anything else could have. Jordan paused, took a breath, then continued. I've been thinking about how I want to carry myself. Moving forward, I used to think I had to change to fit in. Now I know I need to own the space I'm in, just like you do. You made me realize something. I'm not walking into their rooms. They're walking into mine. He hit send. 2 hours later, a text. Came back, proud of you. Now go build something they can't ignore. 1 year later, the story didn't end at the restaurant. Jordan graduated that spring, magna cum laude. At the ceremony, Commander Elijah Brooks sat front row in full dress. Blues, his presence unmistakable. But he wasn't the only one. A handful of staff from Maison Étoilée came too, including the manager who had once tried to escort Jordan out. He was still employed, but different now. Humbled, re-educated. Commander Brooks believed in accountability, not erasure. After graduation, Jordan declined the corporate offers. Instead, he launched a youth leadership nonprofit focused on mentoring young black men navigating predominantly white academic and professional spaces. The mission: not to fit in, but to lead. The name of the program? Legacy in Motion. The C. First fundraising gala was held in the private dining room of Maison Étoilée. Commander Brooks opened the event with a simple speech. This isn't about a restaurant. This is about what happens when a man plants roots deep enough for the next generation to climb higher. My son has climbed, and now he's building ladders for others. Jordan took the stage to a standing ovation. He wasn't wearing a St. Peter's t-shirt anymore. He wore a tailored suit, and his voice carried. But if you listened closely, you could still hear the echo of that first confrontation. The dismissal, the dignity, the legacy. 2 years later, Jordan stood at a podium in Washington, D.C. The room was massive, chandeliers overhead, cameras flashing, murmurs of senators and CEOs lining the front rows. It was the National Youth Equity Conference, and Jordan had been invited as the youngest keynote speaker in its history. He took a deep breath, hands steady on the wood. A few years ago, I walked into a restaurant that my father helped build. I was almost kicked out before I could even sit down. Not because I caused trouble, not because I raised my voice, but because someone looked at me and decided I didn't belong. The room was silent, but what they didn't know was I wasn't. A stranger? I was family. That table, that floor, that ceiling was part of my story long before they tried to erase it. And now, I stand here to tell you, we belong wherever we build. Applause erupted. But Jordan didn't pause for it. His words had purpose now, rhythm, legacy. Leadership is not about fitting in rooms. It's about knowing when to rebuild. For them. That night, after the speech, he stepped outside for air. The city hummed with late-night life. His phone buzzed. A text from his dad. Heard your speech. Watched it twice already. Your grandfather would have cried. I just smiled. Jordan smiled too. He walked a few blocks alone. No entourage, no press. Just him and the streets that reminded him where he came from. He passed a group of teens laughing on the corner, hoodies up, sneakers untied, joy raw and unfiltered. He stopped. Y'all good? They looked at him. A pause, then a nod. You that guy from TV? One of them asked. Jordan laughed. Sometimes. What do you do? Jordan thought about that question. Really thought about it. I try to make sure people like you don't get kicked out of places you already belong. One of the teens grinned. Bet. Jordan gave them his card. No title, just his name and the logo for Legacy in Motion. 6. Months later, Jordan stood inside a new space, a former firehouse in Newark, now gutted and repurposed. The walls were still exposed brick. The floor needed polish. But to him, it already looked like the future. This was the new headquarters for Legacy in Motion, a youth center, library, recording studio, coding lab, and co-working space, designed by young people, for young people. His father came by that afternoon, wearing jeans and a hoodie for once. He stepped inside, took it all in slowly. Jordan walked beside him, nervous and proud. "Well?" he asked. Elijah gave a long, slow nod. "You didn't just build a table, son," he said. "You built a damn house." They stood in silence, just the two of them. No crowd, no applause. Just a father and son in the middle of something far bigger than both of them, yet rooted in everything they'd lived. The grand opening of the Legacy in Motion Center was set for spring. News outlets were lined up. A segment on 60 Minutes was scheduled. Local schools were already preparing busloads of students. Sponsors were watching closely. Jordan had never been more visible or more vulnerable. The days leading up to the opening were a blur of meetings, building inspections, legal calls, and branding presentations. He barely slept. When he did, he dreamed of tables, endless tables, and his father standing behind him, always just out of reach. Then the call came. It was Malik, his operations lead, a childhood friend, someone Jordan had pulled in early, trusted completely. Malik's voice was strained. "Bro, we've got a problem." Jordan froze. "What kind?" "There's an audit. Financial discrepancies, some of the youth development. Funds like $50K moved into a personal LLC. Whose?" Silence. "Yours." Jordan's stomach dropped. "That's impossible." "I know. But the docs say otherwise. It's bad." By the end of the day, it was all over the local blogs. Financial mismanagement at Black Youth Nonprofit? The headlines weren't facts, just suspicion, but suspicion spreads faster than truth. Jordan sat alone in his office late that night, staring at the reports. They looked real, but he hadn't touched any funds. The next morning, his father was waiting outside his door. "You called the lawyers?" Elijah asked. "Yeah. Malik's pulling everything. We'll find the leak." Elijah nodded, but his eyes were sharp. "This is the moment," he said. Jordan looked up. "What moment?" "The one that separates leaders from legends. Not because you made the mistake, but because you're standing in the middle of the fire anyway." Jordan leaned back in his chair. "You think this'll ruin us?" "No," Elijah said. "But it might reveal you. 3 weeks later, the truth comes out." The accounting firm Jordan hired found the error. The funds were moved by someone on the admin staff, funneling money through a shell company. Fraud, pure and simple. Jordan had nothing to do with it. Malik had tried to cover for them early on, hoping it wasn't what it looked like. By the time the official statement cleared Jordan's name, most of the media had moved on. But damage doesn't wait for retractions. Some sponsors pulled out anyway. Some school districts paused partnerships. Even the kids, some of them started asking the staff, "Did Mr. Jordan steal?" It hit him harder than the accusation. He went to Elijah again. "What do I do when people don't believe the truth?" His father put a hand on his shoulder. "You show them, over time, with action." 1 year later, the comeback Jordan kept building. Quietly, focused. The grand opening happened 6 months late, but it happened. The center filled with young men and women, cameras off, pens scribbling, beats thumping from the studio. Kids learning code, pitching their own podcast ideas, writing poetry about power. Legacy in Motion expanded into Detroit, then Atlanta. Then DC Jordan became quieter in Thai. Interviews, less about the headlines, more about the work. But what the world didn't see was how the fire forged him. He now walked into every room with a quiet storm behind his eyes. Not bitterness, but understanding. Leadership wasn't about being right. It was about being ready. 5 years later, full circle, Jordan stood once again at Maison Étoilée. Not as a son this time, but as a partner. Elijah had finally decided to retire. He handed his half of the restaurant to Jordan on the condition it stayed community-rooted. That night, Jordan hosted a private dinner for 20 hand-selected teens from Newark, all dressed sharp in suits and dresses, many of whom had never eaten, at a place with more than 2 forks on the table. At the head of the table, Jordan lifted his glass. "They once tried to kick me out of this place. Now we own it." Laughter, applause. "But this night isn't about me. It's about the next you, the ones who'll build what we never imagined, who'll walk into places not to prove you belong, but to own your purpose the moment you enter." He looked down the table at their faces, wide-eyed, hungry, hopeful. "You're not the future. You are the now. So build. And let them feel you coming before you even speak." That night, as Elijah watched from the shadows near the kitchen, the same spot he once stood when they tried to push his son out, he smiled. Quiet, proud, legacy in motion. Years passed. The name Jordan Brooks became more than just a person. It became a symbol. Legacy in Motion expanded globally. Chapters opened in Johannesburg, London, Kingston, Accra. Former students of the Newark Center became directors of their own hubs. Some entered politics, others started companies. A few came back as mentors, full circle. And yet, Jordan remained grounded. He never stopped visiting the first center. The old firehouse in Newark still smelled like paint and concrete and ambition. He walked its halls quietly now, nodding to the new faces, pausing when he heard familiar rhythms in the music studio or spotted a kid typing with their hoodie up, just like he used to. One evening, he sat on a bench outside the building with his daughter Ava, now 13. She had her mother's eyes, but his thoughtful pause. "Dad," she asked, "were you always this important?" He laughed. "I don't think I'm important." She frowned. "But you are. People cry when they meet you." He looked out. At the sunset. "I'm not important," he said. "But the story is, and I'm just part of it." She tilted her head. "What story?" Jordan turned to her. His voice was soft, the same voice his father once used with him. "The story where they tried to make us small, the one where they said we didn't belong. But instead of shrinking, we built. Instead of yelling, we rose. And one day, when you're standing in your own storm, I want you to remember that it's not about being seen. It's about knowing who you are before the world decides." Ava leaned on his shoulder. "Will they try to push me out too?" He put his arm around her. "Maybe, but you won't flinch, because you already know. You're not a guest in any room you enter. You are the foundation. This is not just a story about a father and a son. This is the story of every door slammed, every name mispronounced, every table we were told wasn't ours. It's about the fire that didn't burn us. It built us. It's about the moments we kept quiet, and the ones where we finally spoke. It's about the man who once wore a uniform to defend a country that didn't always defend him, and the boy who turned a moment of humiliation into a movement of power. This is the legacy, not of wealth, not of fame, but of belonging, quiet, unshakable, generational. Legacy doesn't end with one man. It begins, again, every time we choose to stand.